Welcome back. We are now discussing a very important subject here, connecting with children and disconnecting from gadgets. We had a very enterprising discussion in the first part, and we're going to continue some very interesting questions. First up, I have a tweet that has come from one of our readers who says, my child does not eat without TV in front of him. Dr. Nithya, I'm sure you interact day in and day out with parents. This must not be a standalone problem. This must be a regular problem.
I agree. This is such a common issue, and it's we who introduce children to these gadgets early on. I'm sure all of us would remember when we were young, we would be shown the moon or the stars or the birds. And that's so stimulating for the brain because you're focusing on something real, something far away. You're looking at different kinds of stimulation. It's very different from putting a gadget, a TV or a mobile phone in front of the child and making the child focus on it while eating. So it does create a lot of difficulties.
So does that also mean that children don't really know what they're eating?
Very often that happens. Yeah. Very often that happens that they don't recognize what they are eating. They don't recognize if they are full or hungry. Yeah. So, and that's not healthy at all. Right. Because eating needs to be a self-regulated activity. Right. And not just a task that needs to be done and over with.
Right. You were nodding your head in strong approval when she was actually saying that, Shiva. Yeah. Good to hear from you.
I agree with her because what we are telling the child is not to be in touch with their own body. When the child is growing up, as soon as he's born, he's in touch with what's going on with him. He'll cry, he will, you get to know what's going on. But as the child is growing up, especially when it comes to eating, the body awareness is a very important aspect of a child's growth. So if the child is not even aware of when he is hungry, what is going on, when does he want to eat, how much he wants to eat, how is he going to regulate the other awareness that is going to come in when he is growing up?
Right.
So it's like a dangerous trend that we are setting here, that the child is just not aware when he is feeling happy, when he is feeling sad. It's all a very mechanical way of living. That may not be
Isn't a mealtime also a great opportunity to bond? I mean, I still remember when I was a kid at 7:25 p.m. in the evening, the message would be out to the whole family that all of us have to assemble at the dining area. So we'll all assemble there. I'm not sure in those days we communicated a lot. I mean, I still remember with I probably uttered all my life some 10 or 20 words to my dad. But there were the opportunities to connect probably, but we didn't communicate enough to connect. But today, you have the communication but not the connection. And Absolutely. Dining is a great opportunity.
Absolutely. See, what I also find paradoxical here, especially with Indian families, mind you, I meet so many mothers who tell me, I show my child screen, be it the iPad or mobile or any device, just to get them to eat. And I am like, just what we were talking about, so they don't know what they're eating. So the mothers actually say that we prefer that our child does not know what they're eating, because if they know what we're offering them, they will not eat it. So it is a way of us, all of us, to get our children to eat vegetables, because our children will not eat them otherwise. Yeah. Right? So, that's so paradoxical. So, we are actually, previously when you were asking who's responsible, it's all of these factors in combination that is responsible for what are we prioritizing here? Right. Are we prioritizing, being aware of my hunger cues and knowing when I'm hungry and knowing when I'm full, versus just this quota of vegetables should go inside my body? Are we prioritizing that?
Right.
And it also makes us lose out on a brilliant opportunity to negotiate, to identify what a conflict is, how to resolve it. We're just bypassing the whole thing very conveniently for that moment, but we are setting ourselves up for bigger problems to come.
Absolutely.
So what you're essentially saying is mealtime is a fantastic time to connect. Yeah. And you make the best use of that connection opportunity. Absolutely. And I think parents need to set the example there, right?
Yes.
I still remember when we were talking about this whole mealtime, you were talking about the moon time story. The other thing, how it progressed from a moon time story to a Gabbar Singh aa jayega jaldi kha lo, to now giving out gadgets for children to eat their meal, right?
Yes.
Just coming back, I know, all said and done, right? We can talk as much as possible about gadgets and how they are here. But I think we need to accept the fact that gadgets are here to stay. How do we adapt? How do we adapt and still make meaningful connections? I mean, you would want to go for this.
So I would like to offer a very good example of how we can actually use technology as an enabler, what I was referring to previously. So for example, I have a 5-year-old daughter and she's just at the stage where she's learning to read. So to encourage her to read and to keep her away from screens, we've made a deal. She gets to watch a movie once a month if she has finished reading that book that the movie is based on. So in the last 6 months, we've actually read some pretty brilliant books, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We read that, and she can't read yet because she's just learning to read. So I read it out to her. And that's a brilliant opportunity for us to connect, and she imagines it, she visualizes it, and when we do actually finish the book and watch the movie, that is also a very, very interactive, co-viewed experience wherein we talk about which character is portrayed as different, what did she imagine a character as, and so on and so forth. And now we're reading Harry Potter, and she's so looking forward to watching the movie.
So that's a case of double bonanza, right?
Absolutely.
It's a co-viewing as well as reading the book. Dr. Nithya, there are studies that argue that, when it comes to technology, and if we talk about screen times and technology, co-viewing and co-engaging is a very, very beneficial tool. Your take on that?
Yeah, so again, that goes back to connection. That goes back to saying, what does your child think when he or she is watching something? What do I think about it? How do we discuss our viewpoints on this? So it's based on the principle of connecting. That we're looking at something together, it's a shared experience, and therefore the fact that it is coming out of a gadget is much smaller compared to the larger impact of the shared experience. And that's something that we do encourage, that if a child, and children as they grow, their interests change, the kind of things that they want to watch or engage with change, and we often encourage parents to move with the children.
So in that sense, should we encourage responsible viewing? I mean, should we start encouraging responsible viewing to children, saying that, no, I mean, it just comes back to the same thing. I've always been an advocate of the fact that you can never ban gadgets, you can regulate it. So does encouragement come in the regulation aspect?
It does, it does. Imagine you go to a buffet meal. You will not take everything.
I would still.
You will still. And then what would happen? And then what would happen? Would you skip dinner?
I wouldn't say that on screen today. Anyway, back to you. Yes.
So it's like that, with technology today, there is abundance, there is overabundance of choices. Now, how do we help us and children who are under our responsible care choose? That's the larger question, right? You turn on the television, you pick up your phone, there is something or the other all the time.
Right.
Now, how do you pick and choose what is important, what is not? When can I engage with it, when do I not? Now, that only happens, you spoke about co-viewing. There's also the concept of co-regulation, right? That parents are meant to co-regulate children's choices, children's emotions. And this is another area where that is so required.
So everything is co today because we're talking co-viewing, co-regulation and connection, right? Yeah. So connection is also
I would like to add a point
here
actually. So, when you talked about, when you actually brought in the analogy of a buffet, that's actually a very apt analogy because today our digital diets, it is actually referred to as digital nutrition. And there is this whole concept around quality over quantity. So we actually encourage parents to become literate, media literate, because 2 hours of screen time, all 2 hours of screen time is not the same. 2 hours of, watching a movie with your parent, constantly interacting about it, what I was just talking about, is not the same as sitting passively and watching something, is not the same as killing zombies in a computer game for 2 hours, is not the same as viewing an educational app for 2 hours. So all media, all screen time is not the same. So there is quality over quantity.
How does one decipher? I mean, it's a good point that you made, saying that not all screen time is the same, but how does one decipher? I mean, what's the right one? What's not the right one?
Yeah, earlier Dr. Nithya had spoken about the meal time. She brought in that concept of negotiation. So this is also something that children learn, setting boundaries, talking about it, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. I have a 15-year-old at home, so there is that tussle. We don't have a TV at home for the last 6-7 years, so it is only the laptop or whatever. So we keep negotiating how much screen time she needs. So what is the amount, the minutes of the serial, what kind of serials she wants to watch. So there is always this constant conversation going on. There are times when she might stretch it, or I may sometimes ignore it, but most of the time we tend to follow through with whatever we have spoken and whatever she has spoken. So it brings in those boundaries where the child values the words that she speaks as well as what I speak. So if I have given that screen time for 1 hour, I need to follow up with what I said, and it's the same for her.
So you're quietly building a lovely connection over there. Right?
It's joyful at times,
Yeah.
it's frustrating at times, but the whole thing is you are having a conversation. I think that is what is missing. It's all about control. I control how much you watch, I control how much I watch. It's not about control. It's about being flexible as well as having some kind of a boundary that you work within. See,
Right.
Unless you have a fence, you can't feel safe.
Right. So essentially conversations will lead to good connections as well. Right?
Yes, and a conversation that is respectful on both counts. It is not like Shubha is saying, not just that I as a parent know what's best and you just ought to follow it, but to be able to negotiate, particularly with teenagers. I think that's very, very important.
Right.
I'd also like to add that it's so important for everybody to be aware of what a growing brain can take. Dr. Meghna earlier spoke about, the effects of media exposure on the brain, and technology is so available now to everybody. But what many of us don't recognize is that there are some guidelines about what is considered okay and what is not.
Right.
It might surprise many people to know that children younger than 18 months are advised not to have any screen exposure at all unless it's a video chat. This is by the American Academy of Pediatrics. In 2016, they have released their guidelines. But if you just walked around and saw how many infants were watching gadgets, watching screens over extended periods of time, and how that translates into difficulties for them, one would really want this information to be available more freely for people to take it into cognizance.
Take cognizance
Yes,
of the fact.
yes.
Right. Very good point that you made. Dr. Meghna, I just need to ask you one thing. We've all talked about, the pluses and minuses, and we're trying to see where the balance is tilting towards. Do gadgets promote social interactions?
I think it depends on how you use them. If you are
Do
sitting...
they have the potential?
Of course, there's no doubt they do. As Dr. Nithya was talking about, a gadget can be used to connect with far-flung relatives and friends. I can use my gadget to get my child to talk to their grandparents who are not in town and anywhere in the world. So, and for a teenager to connect to their friends all over the world, or even they've relocated to a new city and they're missing their old friends. It can definitely aid social connection. Again, it's about how you use them. You're not talking to the person sitting next to you. You're not playing with the person sitting next to you, and you're busy on the gadget. That's alone together, right? Is
Right.
that really
It
aiding
goes back to
social
that.
connection? No. So
Correct.
it's not about what technology does. It's about how you use it.
Fantastic point. So it's about how we use technology to the best of our interests and the best of our abilities to ensure connections. Well, that's going to be our discussion point in the third segment of this wonderful conversation we are having today, right here, where we're talking about connecting with children and disconnecting from gadgets. So when we come back on the other side, plenty more coming your way. Stay tuned.